All right, students. So today let us look at the text of The Merchant of Venice, and we begin with Act 1, Scene 1 of the play. And first and foremost, let us read what is said in the introduction of the play. In Act 1, Scene 1, the opening scene gives the exposition. That means the introduction to the play, the situation on which the story is based. We are introduced to Antonio the merchant, who gives the title to the drama, and then interest is heightened by showing him in a melancholic mood. Salarino and Salanio, his two friends, give various reasons for his sadness and try to bring him out of it. Bassanio, the closest friend of Antonio, asks for a loan from him in order to present himself as an eligible suitor to Portia. And I told you already in the previous class that Portia was the only daughter of a rich elite class gentleman, and she was the one who had inherited all her father's wealth and property. Her father had already died. A rich heiress of Belmont. Now this Belmont actually does not exist anywhere in the world, but William Shakespeare created this particular place name, and Portia is said to be from Belmont. Though Venice is a place which you can find in Italy if you look into the map of Europe. Now Antonio's ships, as I had told you earlier, are still at sea. He has no ready cash, and so he cannot give the money to Bassanio, but he authorizes Bassanio to use his good name for credit and get a loan from the moneylenders. So scene 1 begins. We have Venice, a street. Enter Antonio, Salarino and Salanio. Now Antonio speaks. In sooth, I know not why I am so sad. Truly speaking, I have no idea as to why I am feeling so sad. It wearies me, you say it wearies you, meaning to say it makes me tired. I am also fed up with it, and you guys are telling me that even you feel fed up to see me in this condition. But how I caught it, found it, or came by it, what stuff it is made of, whereof it is born, I am to learn. Meaning to say, but how I got it, this kind of melancholy mood or this sadness, how I found it or came by it, and what is it made of, whereof it is born, meaning to say from where is it born. All these things I am still to know. I still don't know. I am yet to learn. And such a want with sadness makes of me. So sadness is making a fool of me. I am being basically made a fool by this sadness. I mean, people looking at me think of me as a fool, that without any reason I look so sad, depressed, lost in my thoughts. So this sadness is actually making a fool of me. That I have much ado to know myself. That it makes me believe that I have still a lot to know about myself. I am not yet sure about myself. In other words, I don't know what kind of person I am. I am still yet to know what kind of person I am. Now, want wit is an absent-minded fellow. So I am to learn means I am yet to learn. Whereof means of what origin. Caught means acquired. So you see, all the meanings are provided here, and you can go through these meanings as you read along. Now Salarino, in response to these words of Antonio, says, your mind is tossing on the ocean. Your mind is actually tossing on the ocean. Why? Because there where your argosies with portly sail like signors and rich burghers on the flood, or as it were the pageants of the sea, do overpeer the petty traffickers. Now in the previous video which I had uploaded, I had explained this already. So in case if you missed it out, you can just play it again, and you can just go to the YouTube link and see it again. Anyway, I'll just tell you in brief that your mind is actually with your ships, your argosies. These cargo ships carrying a lot of cargo are actually away from Venice, and that's the reason why you are worried about them. And then he makes a comparison. He says that these cargo ships of yours are like rich elite class gentlemen or burghers. Burghers means citizens. And on the flood here refers to the sea water. That means these ships are sailing in the sea. or as it were the pageants of the sea, or they may even be compared, or they may even be called the pageants. These are the they are the most elegant ships in the sea, so all others look up to them as something very extraordinary, something wonderful. So they are like a kind of road show, just as you get to see on Republic Day in Rajpath in New Delhi, where you have the tableaus brought out by different organizations and also by the different states of India. So these ships are also such pageants, and as they move, they seem to overpeer the petty traffickers. They are so big, so large, so huge that the petty or ordinary traffickers or ships and boats which sail beside them in the ocean or in the sea, they look much smaller and they seem to be towering over them. That courtesy to them, do them reverence as they fly by them with their woven wings. Meaning to say that when these big ships move along, they create waves in the water, and this causes the smaller boats and ships nearby to bob up and down, and it seems as though these smaller boats and ships, these other vessels which are much smaller in size, they are bowing again and again as if to show respect to Antonio's large argosies. So that's what we have from the first page of the text from your textbook. Now we move on to the next page. So in the next page, Salanio comments. This is Salanio who speaks up next. So initially it was Salarino and now Salanio. Believe me, sir, had I such venture forth, the better part of my affections would be with my hopes abroad. Believe me, sir, if I happen to have such such business abroad, just as you have so many ships loaded with cargo going to different ports of the world, so if I had such business, then a much bigger or better part of my thoughts, my thoughts would be with my hopes abroad, meaning to say my business hopes abroad. So I would be constantly, most of the time, thinking about my business deals and my ships, if I had such ships as you have. I should be still plucking the grass to know where sits the wind. So I should be plucking. There was a common custom in those times. I think it is explained here, so you can just have a look. Holding up a blade of grass to see in which direction the wind is blowing. So I would have been doing this, holding up a blade of grass, just break maybe just a blade of grass and then hold it up against the blowing wind to see in which direction it bends, so that it shows in which direction the wind is moving. So I would have been doing that. And second thing that I would be doing, or the third thing, first thing is that I would be constantly thinking about them. Second is that I would be plucking the grass to see the direction of the wind. And the third thing would be I'd be peering in maps for ports and piers and roads. Now what are these ports and piers and roads? Again, explanation is provided here. Piers are harbors, roads are channels, and ports are, of course, kind of harbors. So I would be looking for all the possible stoppages of my ships as they move from Venice to other parts of the world. And every object that might make me fear misfortune to my ventures, out of doubt would make me sad. And then every possible object which could cause damage to my ships, my ventures, would definitely make me sad. Now what are those objects? Sometimes there can be terrible storms, sometimes there could be submerged rocks, sometimes submerged sandbanks. There are many dangers in the oceans and seas which ships could possibly face. So while I thought about them, I would have felt sad. So Salarino again continues. He says, my wind cooling my broth. When I would sit down to have my bowl of soup, and when I would blow from my mouth upon the soup, if it is hot, then the blowing storms in the ocean would suddenly come to my mind, because the wind which comes out of my mouth, rather the air which is pushed out of my mouth, he calls it his wind. He means to say that when I would blow air on my broth, I would be reminded of the terrible storms in the sea. And this would blow me to an ague when I thought what harm a wind too great at sea might do. and this would be causing me a lot of tension, because then my thoughts would be about what a danger my ship would possibly face if such a terrible storm happened in the sea. I should not see the sandy hourglass run, but I should think of shallows and of flats. Now this is what I have explained in my previous video the other day. If you want, you can again see that. I have given some explanation there. So the sandy hourglass is nothing but the sand clock, and it takes exactly an hour for sand to flow from the upper hemisphere to the lower hemisphere through a capillary with which these two hemispheres are connected. So I would be watching this, and then suddenly I'd be reminded of the submerged shallows and flats. What are shallows and flats? These are supposed to be shallow waters of flats or sandbanks. These are just underneath the surface of the water, and at any given point of time, if the captain of the ship is not careful, the ship can run into them and can get destroyed. And sandy hourglass has been explained here. You can just read the reference from your textbook, plus I have explained also, so there should be no problem. So that is another fear that I would have, he said. And then he says, and see my wealthy Andrew decked in sand, veiling her high top lower than her ribs to kiss her burial. Now this is also what I have explained in my previous video, that what would happen to Andrew, my biggest ship. It would be suddenly running aground, hitting the submerged shallow or flat, and then it would be tilting on one side till the mast of the ship would be lower than the body of the ship. And that's how what would happen, the ship would be completely destroyed. So the mast would touch the water and thus kiss the burial of the ship. Should I go to church and see the holy edifice of stone, and not bethink me straight of dangerous rocks, which touching but my gentle vessel's side would scatter all her spices on the stream, enrobe the roaring waters with my silks. This also I had explained in the previous video, that what would happen to the merchandise, what would happen to the goods, whether it is spices or whether it is the silk cloth. All these goods, all these items on board the ship would be scattered in the water and would be completely ruined. Enrobe the roaring waters with my silks, and in a word, but even now worth this and now worth nothing. In a simpler term, if we can explain this, he says it is that the cargo would be just a while before it was worth so much, and the very next moment when it falls into the water, it is worth nothing. So this is what he says. So we stop here. Again we'll continue in our next class from the next page. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.